So just another couple of moments here in Germany, and then we'll move over to France. So like I was mentioning before I ran out of time in the last video, is that Kaiser Wilhelm II is going to become the next emperor after Wilhelm I. And he and Bismarck are going to have opposing ideas about what to do with the SPD. All right, so Bismarck, even though he is supporting some economic measures that the workers are going to like, at the end, his bottom line is to still get rid of the SPD. He doesn't want it to exist as a party anymore. And Wilhelm II opposes these efforts. All right, he doesn't feel like the SPD should cease to exist as a party. All right, so Wilhelm is very interested in keeping and gaining more support from the workers, and so what he does, Bismarck is actually pretty old at this point. He's in his 70s. He forces Bismarck to resign, uh, and um, and then he works, or he tries to work, with the working class in order to get them to renounce their socialist ties. All right, so he passes laws that are aimed at helping the workers. So his idea is to, instead of just eliminating the party, basically get people to kind of transfer out of the SPD and start to identify more with the kind of liberal or conservative parties. Um, but actually, these efforts are also not successful. You're going to see that by 1912, the SPD is going to be the largest party in the Reichstag. So this is at the eve of World War One. All right. And you're also going to see one of the reasons why the SPD continues to exist is because in certain ways they are going to turn away from radicalism even more. Like when World War One is approaching, and when we discuss the causes of World War One, we're going to see that they're complex, and it takes a while for these alliances to kind of entangle themselves. So there already is a lot of international tension that exists, and instead of being anti-militarization like the SPD originally was, when World War One is closer, they actually do start to support increased military spending. All right, so you see William kind of taking a different approach to the SPD, not trying to get rid of it, but outright by by kind of taking matters into his own hands politically, but ultimately just trying to get them to kind of organically leave the party. All right, but he is also not successful, and you're going to see that the SPD is still uh, very strong in the state of Germany. So let's now move on to France. Moving on to France, if you remember from our discussions earlier in this chapter, uh, the Second French Empire, right? It started out as the Second French Republic after the revolutions of 1848. Once Napoleon III declares himself emperor, it changes into the Second French Empire, but that collapses when Napoleon III is captured during the Franco-Prussian War. So what happens to the French government after that? Well, eventually it's going to turn into something we call the Third French Republic, but before that, there's sort of a chaotic interim period. All right. First, they need to have some sort of government because after the Franco-Prussian War, at first, when Napoleon III is captured, Prussia actually doesn't have anybody to sign a peace treaty with, all right? They don't have an executive anymore. So at first, you have a National Assembly established, all right? This lasts until the start of the Third French Republic in 1875. And again, you don't have an emperor, all right? You don't really have a president either. You're going to have what's called a chief executive, all right? So Adolphe Thiers is going to be the chief executive of France, and he's ultimately going to be able to negotiate the peace terms with with Prussia. But what's important, I guess, that leads to a lot of chaos in this interim period is that most of the people that are in the National Assembly are monarchists, they're mostly conservative, and that's really going to make the people in particular in Paris unhappy. We know based on the legacy of the French Revolution, of the 1848 revolutions, that there are a lot of radical people that exist in the urban areas as a result of the Industrial Revolution. So what do they feel about this new National Assembly? Well, they don't like it. All right, so they're going to try to take political matters into their own hands, and they set up something called the Paris Commune. Not to be confused, although they are similar in nature, with the Paris Commune from the French Revolution. Okay, so when you're doing IDs, preparing for the AP exam, realize that there are two different Paris Communes. Okay, this is the second one. All right, so this one is a radical communist government. All right, so it's set up in Paris, as the name suggests. All right, and what they're going to do is try to defeat the National Assembly by laying siege to Paris. All right, so it's going to be very violent in nature. All right, and also they're going to be they are um, very much resistant to the authority of the National Assembly. They don't actually believe that the National Assembly is the legitimate government. All right, so basically the Paris Commune emerges as this political enemy to the National Assembly. All right, and in 1871, from the spring, basically the entire spring actually of 1871, so March to May, the Paris Commune is going to fight in essentially a civil war against the National Assembly. All right. And in this conflict, you're going to have approximately 20,000 people get executed. All right. After this conflict is over, you're also going to have thousands die during the conflict. Some of this is also because it's very easy for the National Assembly to send troops throughout Paris to put them down, and that's because of the widening of the boulevards during the kind of industrialization era in Paris. Remember George Haussmann? We've already talked about this. All right. So ultimately, what's going to happen is that the Commune's going to be defeated, and Adolphe Thiers is is ultimately the one who's kind of in charge of the defeat of the Paris Commune, and this is going to bring more stability into France. All right, so we're going to talk about the Third French Republic, this new form of government that emerges after the Paris Commune is put down. So this Third French Republic, in a lot of ways it's reactionary against the Paris Commune, although they are going to institute some reforms that is going to appease, a large portion of the population, especially by opening up education to all social classes, secularizing education. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But first, let's think about how the Third French Republic is made up. So they are largely dominated by the bourgeoisie. So we see again, after the Paris Commune is defeated, less influenced by radical classes. All right. They also, one of the reasons why the bourgeoisie is so representative in the Third French Republic is that by the establishment of this republic, 1875, France was doing very well economically. Right, so it makes sense that, a very viable, successful economic class is controlling the Third French Republic. All right, so the name of the Legislative Assembly in the Third French Republic was called the Chamber of Deputies. All right, so it's not called the National Assembly. All right, but it's still the Legislative Assembly of the French Parliament. All right, they are the most powerful. Okay, so, interestingly, the president does not have as much power. All right. Also, the Chamber of Deputies is going to be elected by universal suffrage. So again, this is a Republican form of government. All right. So, they are appeasing all parts of the population to a certain extent. It's not nearly as conservative as the National Assembly, and some of that is because they don't want another Paris Commune to emerge. All right. But at the same time, they don't really trust the instinct of the entire population. So in terms of electing Senate members, they do have indirect Senate elections, which was what the United States had for a period. So that means that the people did not directly elect their senators. Rather, they selected other people, right? Kind of another legislature that ultimately selected senators. All right, but what we're going to see is that the Third French Republic establishes parliamentary supremacy. All right, the parliament is going to be more powerful than the president, and this is going to be very significant in terms of the evolution of France, and also the influence of every part of the French population, hence the term mass politics. So some of the reforms that are instituted by the Third French Republic, first off, they are going to fully legalize trade unions, and this is significant because during some periods when Napoleon III was ruling, he suppressed trade unions. Okay, so this is also going to demonstrate how the Third French Republic is trying to represent the demands of all classes, particularly the working classes. All right. Even more importantly, arguably, is what is happening to education. Okay, and this is largely due to the efforts of Jules Ferry, who we see in this image down here. So what Jules Ferry is doing is he is increasingly opening up education to all social classes in France, all right? And not just opening up education, but also secularizing it. So, you know, removing the catechism and the Ave Maria from parts of the um, from kind of the rituals of the classroom. All right. Instead, you know, the students would recite the Pledge of Allegiance. They sing the national anthem. So kind of inserting patriotism and nationalism into education rather than religion. Interestingly, you know, we see this in a lot of instances. We were previously talking about how Bismarck was trying to control the Catholic Center Party. Here we see also the French government trying to control the church and trying to make sure that the state ultimately is supreme over the church. All right. Um, Also, education is going to be tax supported. It's going to be compulsory, which means no matter who you are, you have to go to school. And you might ask why that is and what this has to do with mass politics. A lot of this is due to the fact that, of course, education prepares the population to become good, uh, good citizens, right? You know, if universal manhood suffrage exists, then the people who are voting should understand what they're voting for. They should have political knowledge and understanding. Not to mention the fact that schools are also socializing agents. And of course, also, if people are reciting the national or singing the national anthem, reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, schools also are going to train students to be even more nationalistic. So, you know, in times of war, for example, you're going to have the citizens very much support the military efforts of the country against other countries. All right, so you know, so this is going to be these are going to be some of the significant reforms that are instituted by the Third French Republic. You see how these, to a large extent, are kind of opening up the participation for some of the lower classes. And let's now turn to some of the threats to the Third French Republic. So there are some challenges to the Third French Republic, and you know, as we just saw, because a lot of the reforms are helping some of the lower classes, it's not surprising that a lot of these challenges are coming from the right. And the one that you need to know the most is an event called the Dreyfus Affair. Okay, this starts in 1894 and isn't resolved actually until 1905. Okay, that's in the notes, by the way. I realize that's not here in the slide. Okay, so so this is, yeah, the most serious threat to the Republic. Why? Well, who is Alfred Dreyfus? He's here, right? And Alfred Dreyfus was a military officer who was falsely accused of treason. Okay, there was suspicion among conservatives that he was supplying information to the Germans. All right, but it's also interesting to note that Alfred Dreyfus was Jewish, and so a lot of this was caused by anti-Semitism. Um, so why does this drive the Republic apart? You have two different reactions to Dreyfus's accusation. Also, at first, Dreyfus actually is found guilty, and he is given solitary confinement. He's exiled to this remote island, kind of away from all human contact. Okay, so conservatives and people who are in favor of the military and Catholics, they all actually support the decision to exile Dreyfus. Oh, and also anti-Semites, obviously, are supporting this. Okay, but this is driving a wedge in the Republican government because you know, more liberals or radicals believe that Dreyfus, like anybody else, should have political rights, and they believe that these accusations were baseless. Okay, and you're going to see that certain famous people are going to kind of speak out on behalf of Dreyfus. The most notable one is Emile Zola, the realist thinker. Okay, we'll finish this in just a moment, almost out of time.